Applying the external evidence test, I concluded I could hold the New Testament in my hand and say what I have is what was written down, and what was written down was true. In other words, Jesus actually said that, and he actually did that. The external evidence test asks the question, is there material totally apart from the book under investigation that confirms the inner testimony with the Bible? Is there literary, archaeological, historical evidence going back to the first century, totally apart from the Bible, that confirms its inner testimony? Oh, there is. One is the literary example of Eusebius. Eusebius was an historian. In his works, he records Papius. Papius, who was the bishop of Hierapolis, now get this, he was a disciple of the Apostle John also. So see what it means. It takes from Eusebius to Papius all the way back to the apostles, the Apostle John. And Eusebius says this is what Papius said that he had learned from the Apostle John. He said, for he, that is Mark, talking about the Gospel of Mark, Mark, paid attention to this one thing, not to admit anything that he had heard, not to include any false statement among them. Now what does that mean? Well, Mark, who wrote the Gospel of Mark, recorded it, was not an eyewitness to Jesus in most of what he wrote about. You say, well, how could he say those things then? Because Mark was a recorder or a transcriber for Peter. Peter was the eyewitness. So you could actually call it the Gospel of Peter if you wanted to, but it's called the Gospel of Mark. So Mark was a recorder for Peter, who is the eyewitness of Jesus. And it says, for he, Mark, who is recording Peter, paid attention to this one thing, not to admit anything that he had heard from who? From Peter, and not to include any false statement among them. That goes all the way back to the time of the apostles. That is external evidence that confirms the accuracy of the Gospel of Mark recording what the eyewitness Peter had seen and heard, bringing it all the way up through Papius to Irenaeus. Using the external evidence test when it comes to literature, there is sufficient evidence to show that the New Testament is reliable and accurate.